In the latter half of the 1500s, terror had spread through the rural community of Bedburg in what was the electorate of Cologne in the former Holy Roman Empire. Wreaking bloody chaos through the wider area, one man would leave death in his wake. Tonight, as we step into the unknown, we come face to face with the Werewolf of Bedburg. For over 20 years, cattle would be mutilated and 18 people murdered. First thought to be wolf attacks, it would not be long before culprits of a darker, more occult background would be considered, until finally a man would be apprehended, tortured to confession, and then beheaded. A violent end for a violent man. With one stroke of a headman's blade, this bloody chapter of history would be closed, and one of the most enduring werewolf legends would be born. Born in the 1530s in a village near Bedburg, Peter Stumpp would grow to be a successful and wealthy farmer. Supposedly, and by his own account, he had a normal childhood. In the modern day, analysts and profilers would look to the childhood of a convicted serial killer, especially one that practiced cannibalism, and try to see what happened or led to the adult's path of wanton violence. Very few would, I am sure, be faced with the story of meeting the devil at age 12. This meeting is where Stumpp's supposed lycanthropy would arise. Beginning to dabble with black magic and the occult in his pre-teen years, Peter's meeting with the devil would come from this. The fallen angel would give a magical girdle or belt which allowed him to take on the form of a wolf. The exact description? The likeness of a greedy, devouring wolf, strong and mighty, with eyes great and large, which in night sparkled like fire, a mouth great and wide, with most sharp and cruel teeth, a huge body, and mighty paws. And once the belt was removed, he would return to his human form. It seemed that Stumpp was a model citizen of sorts. He would become a husband, though widowed, and had 2 children, a daughter and a son. I found descriptions that suggest he was well liked and well known in Cologne, Bedburg, and Epraf, with this friendliness even stretching on whilst the attacks and murders were happening. Talk about the devil you know. Beginning in the 1560s, cattle would be mutilated around Bedburg, their abdomens ripped open. At first, and most sensibly, the locals would assume wolves were the culprits. However, humans would begin to fall prey, sadly, the majority being children, with 13 of them being unfortunate casualties attributed to Peter Stump's bloodlust. In total, Stumpp would confess to 18 murders, including his own son. Having lured him into the forest, Peter would wear his girdle, transform into the monstrous form of the werewolf, and slew his son before devouring the boy's brains. Luring people away and setting traps for his unfortunate victims would enable him to continue his bloody rampage. Perhaps he was relying on his good standing with the members of his community. So much so, 2 men and 3 women were said to have been victims. Even more shockingly, 2 of these women were pregnant, their fetuses torn from the womb. It would be far from surprising to note that terror had taken hold of this corner of the Holy Roman Empire. People would be too scared to stray far from home, would only travel in large groups, and, oftentimes, go armed. There are stories of people bravely going from one town to another, and along their journey find the discarded limbs of previous victims. In a time when religion still dominated Europe, it might have seemed to these people that God had forsaken them. The final attack that would lead to Stumpp's capture would happen in 1589. A group of children would be playing in a meadow. Maybe some time had passed since the last attack, and the fear and paranoia had eased. Whatever the reason for the children to be out playing during this time, they would be attacked by a wolf. Attempting to take one girl, the wolf would struggle due to the girl's clothing. As the alarm went up and the hunting party took up the fleeing beast's trail, the wolf disappeared. Instead, they found Peter Stumpp. I saw one account that suggested the wolf had been wounded in a prior attack, losing its left paw. Stumpp had supposedly lost his left hand as well. Different accounts said this was as a child, while some seem to push the notion this was a wound he had taken whilst in werewolf form. Whenever the injury had occurred, and as some of you may know, werewolf folklore around wounding the beast would prevail. The missing left hand was evidence enough. Stumpp would be arrested. Whether he initially tried to plead his innocence at all, I cannot say, but under extreme torture, Peter Stumpp would confess. He would tell the tale of his early beginnings with black magic and the devil, spoke about how his magical girdle would transform him to a wolf, and then how he had attacked and killed both cattle and humans across a 25-year span. Of the magic girdle, it was never found. Stumpp had told the magistrates where to find it, but they returned empty-handed. This led to the belief the devil had returned and snatched this sinister item away. After his torture on the rack, Peter would confess to a host of other crimes, among them witchcraft and practicing the occult, having an incestuous relationship with his daughter and another relative, and sexual relations with a succubus sent by the devil. On All Hallows Eve, 1589, Peter Stumpp would be executed. His violent murders would be repaid with a horrific death. Placed upon the wheel to tear the flesh from his body with 10 scorching pincers, his limbs were then broken by the blunt side of an axe. Stumpp was then beheaded, his body burned on a pyre, and his head placed atop a pole for all to see. His daughter Sybil and mistress Catherine Trompin, the distant relative, were also executed. They were flayed and then strangled, or burned at the stake. I saw both methods accounted for. And so, the Werewolf of Bedburg and his accomplices were brought to justice. Or were they? Even to this day, there is some doubt whether 3 innocent people were executed for crimes they may not have committed. Of course, we have Stumpp's own confession, though how much faith can we really put in words brought out under duress of torture? Besides the story of the hunting party finding Stumpp after the wolf attack, I couldn't quite see much evidence or reasoning for why anybody suspected the man before his confession. Perhaps Stumpp was a murderer, or not, and perhaps his relationship with his daughter and or Catherine Trompin was true. At the very least, rumours would have spread and circulated, and in a time of superstition and ardent religious belief, rumours could be just as deadly as the truth. Much like in the previous episode of Unknown, the Dance Macabre, the Plague of 1518, maybe the geopolitics of the time had some contributing factor. Towards the latter spell of Stumpp's murderous spree, the Cologne War raged. Among other things, this was a religious war between Catholics and Protestants. The Catholic faction would win out, and perhaps target Stumpp as a wealthy Protestant, using him as a scapegoat for another's crimes, and in the process, dissuade any other Protestants from fomenting rebellion. With so much time having passed and a real lack of any evidence, it is hard to conclusively say whether Stumpp was guilty of any or all crimes he was accused of. It seems plausible that Stumpp may have been a murderer, perhaps practicing cannibalism, which in turn became lycanthropy. Witchcraft and the occult would look a lot different then than it would now, so some allegations of black magic would stick in my opinion. All the incest, well, I can only hope that isn't true. What do you think? Guilty or innocent? Or maybe somewhere between? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Should you be on your travels in Western Germany and come across an old, discarded belt, be wary lest you fall foul of the Werewolf of Bedburg and be lost in the unknown.